Howdy, y'all. Caleb here, and we're talking about the Big Boi. This is one of the biggest models in Age of Sigmar, and it belongs to Seraphon. It's not the biggest. I think that is probably the Corn Dragon, but the Dread Saurian is a giant dinosaur, and that's why we play Seraphon, right? So, we're going to take a look at the Dread Saurian today. What can it do in our army? Is it playable? We know it has some downsides. We're going to look at some of those too. First off, we see here, this is the Forge World page, and you'll notice $240 for this one model, and it doesn't even come with the base. You do have to buy your base separately. So that is quite expensive. But if you're like me, you saw this thing and you looked at it and you go, I could do that. And then you saw, oh wait, that's resin. No, thank you. Oh, but it's a huge dinosaur. Maybe I could do it. No, that tail. Look at how skinny that tail is. That thing is so stupid. But I could fix that. And then you see how big that base is. 280 millimeter base. Yeah, forget that. And then you're like, well, I'll just put it in my cart and think about it. Oh wait, it's out of stock. Dread Saurian has a reputation of being in and out of stock quite often. So it's obviously not available right now when I took these screenshots, but it is what it is. It's a Forge World resin model. It is a big boy, and it does come on a 280 millimeter base by 210 millimeter. I took a picture a long time ago of how big this thing is. I had a cutout because I don't actually own one. And that was a cardboard cutout of that base size compared to a skink and compared to a carnosaur. That thing is enormous. And so one of the biggest considerations about the Dread Saurian is how big that base is. You have to be able to move it around your table. And sometimes it's going to be really hard unless you can get this Dread Saurian to fly. Obviously, it doesn't have wings, but we have ways around that. We have ways to make it fly. So the base isn't totally unusable. It is quite hard, but it's not totally unusable. So big base, big resin. This thing is a big model. Let's look at the Warscroll. So the thing that really jumps out to you here is that 35 wounds on this Dread Saurian. That is a ton of wounds for a monster, especially when we have certain abilities that will let us buff that. It does have a move of 10 inches, which gets bracketed, 4-up save, and 8 bravery. You'll notice some of its melee weapons here, Gargantuan Jaws, and this is a jaw attack, so it will get +1 to its attacks in Coalesced. It has 3 attacks, 4s. Get out of here with your 4s to hit. What is that? 4s and 3s, -2 rend, and 6 damage. So it does do a ton of damage, but that 4 to hit is just terrible, especially on a big, giant centerpiece model like this. It's got to hit better than 4s. Raking Claws has 6 attacks that start at 2 up to hit, that does a bracket, and then 3's to wound, -1 rend, 2 damage. So you'll get some decent damage out of that one. Armored Tail, only 1 attack, 4s and 3s, -1 rend, d6 damage. In other words, this thing will never hit. 1 attack on 4s and 3s, only -1 rend, especially -1 rend in AOS 3. That -1 rend is not gonna get through much. And then you've got to still roll for your damage. So just write that attack off. So its attacks, I'm going to be honest, leave a lot to want. It's really that to hit is really what's hurting it big time. But then a lot of the stuff that's good gets bracketed, and so that can be pretty devastating if he does get bracketed, and your already sad output is going to get hurt quite a bit. It does have some great abilities, though. Let's look at some of these abilities. Each time this model is affected by a spell or endless spell, you roll a dice. On a 6-up, you ignore the spell. And on a 4-up, if a Slon's within 12 inches, you'll ignore it. So this is pretty nice, and just about all of our armors are going to have a Slon. So this really helps that damage reduction from spells. And so one way that people can damage him is on spells. There's not going to be a whole lot of spells that can damage him, but there's a couple that might instant kill this Dread Saurian, like Hand of Dust, maybe, where you're going to really be preying on that dice roll here. And so that does help him stay alive a little bit longer. Obliterating charge. After this model makes a charge move, roll a dice for each enemy unit within 1 inch of this model. On a 2-up, that model suffers D3 mortal wounds if it's a monster, or D6 if it's not a monster. So we got some impact wounds on the charge, and what's nice about this is such a big base. You can charge this thing into a lot. You will probably do more damage on the charge with this model than you will in combat. So that's nice, especially once we get to the monstrous abilities you can add to this as well. Death throws. If this model is slain before moving it from the battlefield, roll a dice for each enemy unit within 3. If it's not a monster, on a 4-up, they suffer D3 mortal wounds. Okay, so it blows up, basically. Terror. Subtract 1 from bravery characteristics of enemy units while they are within 3 inches of any friendly units with this ability. You see this ability shared with a lot of things like Carnosaurs and some of the banners and stuff, so that Terror is also on the Dread Saurian. Would have been nice if it was keyworded something else so we could stack it with some other things, but we can stack it with this next ability, Roar of Ruin. Once per battle, at the start of the Battle Shock phase, you can say this model will use its Roar of Ruin. If you do so, half the bravery characteristics of enemy units, rounding up, that are within 12 inches of this model until the end of that phase. So we have a way to stack on top of that Terror some Battle Shock debuffs. So that's kind of nice. It does give you a note here that you first half it and then you subtract 1 from it. So just a little clarification there. Now, this is a Forge World model, and this is the Warscroll that they currently have. And the Dread Saurian is currently priced at 510 points. Now, all of that is subject to change. We might see Forge World updates, but right now he's priced at 510 points. Hopefully they don't update this tomorrow right after I uploaded this video, but currently he's 510 points, which I think is, I think he's priced about right for what he's going to do. And we'll look at what his role is. I don't think his role is a damage output monster. And we see that if we just look at his base damage table, it's not very good. Against a 4-up save, you're going to be doing about 10 damage from the Dread Saurian. That's without him taking any buffs or anything. That's just his base Warscroll. That's not really all that good. In fact, if you compare that to a Stegodon with no buffs, the Stegodon is actually doing more damage, and that's quite a bit cheaper. Not quite half as cheap, but we're getting there. So the Stegodon actually does slightly more average damage than a Stegodon, or than a Dread Saurian does, base Warscroll. So that's kind of sad when you think about how gigantic this base is. 280 millimeters, a gigantic dinosaur for 510 points. I would usually hope for a little bit more output than that. We can compare it to, well, before we compare it to anything else, in Coalesce, we do get +1 to jaw attacks, and I think I would take a Dread Saurian in Coalesce probably most often, because I think that's where its role will really shine, and we'll look at that in a second. But we do get +1 to jaw attacks, and so that does give us another pip of damage there. We're up to 11.8, almost 12. And so, I mean, you're going to be killing stuff with them. You're going to be killing models. You're going to be killing like MSU units, but you're not really going to attack any hard target with this and take them out. A lot of your big enemy monster heroes are going to be at a 3-up base save, and they're going to add 1 to that to their save, and so you're going to be doing 6 damage to them, which isn't bad, but they're going to get a chance to hit back. So you are going to kill stuff with the Dread Saurian, but it's not its specialty. I wanted to compare it to a couple other big names in damage output. If we put him up against Gotrek, who is actually quite a bit cheaper now, he's 430 points, and he gets to fight twice. He's going to do in both of those fights. When he fights twice, he's going to do 22 damage. So he's doubling up the Dread Saurian damage. So the Dread Saurian's doing the amount of damage Gotrek is probably doing in one turn, but Gotrek does do it with a lot of mortals, where the Dread Saurian doesn't quite do that as much. Dread Saurian does have some mortals on the charge. I'm not putting those in here just because it's so random. You don't know how many you're going to pile into. That does add a few damage, but obviously Gotrek is going to kill a lot more. We all know that Gotrek can kill stuff. Against the Mega Gargant, one of our allies that we could take as a mercenary, Bundo Whalebiter, he's 490 points. He's a little bit cheaper. He does about the same output of damage, but he's on a much smaller base, and he has a couple extra abilities. He can't be instant slain. He can kick objectives around. So he has a couple of other things added to it. But he has the same wound characteristics. But I don't think he's as tough as the Dread Saurian. So I would probably rather have the Dread Saurian than the Mercenary here, because we have some fun stuff that we can do with the Dread Saurian. Another comparison, Dread Saurian versus Kragnos. I'm just picking out some of the big guys. Kragnos does about twice the damage he does and has some other abilities. Obviously, Kragnos is like 700 points, maybe 660 now or something like that. He's quite a bit more expensive, but has more utility. Obviously, we can't take him in Seraphim, but I'm just trying to compare him to some of the big boys in the meta right now. So he's not a damage dealer. What does the Dread Saurian do? Are there any units that buff the Dread Saurian? And we have a couple that buff him. The Skink Starseer can let him pull off a longer charge. You get to roll 3d6 for that charge if you're within 12 inches of him. Now, the Skink Starseer does say wholly within 12. This is a lot of things that you have to worry about. On any of these buffs, you have to be wholly within those units that are buffing them. And that makes it difficult with the Dread Saurian because that base is so big. It's like an 11-inch long base. So if you're putting buffs on him, you need to be right up against this Dread Saurian. So remember that whenever you're applying these buffs. He does have a great spell that really, really works well for that Dread Saurian. It's a casting value of 7, 18-inch range. It gives a +1 to save or -1 to save to the enemy you're attacking. So it effectively gives him extra rend. But I'm looking at that +1 to save. I'm looking at ways I can get that Dread Saurian from a 4-up to a 3-up for those 35 to 37 wounds that he's got. And so that really helps there. The Slon or Croak also has a command ability for +1 to save versus shooting, which is nice. If somebody's going to be targeting him and shooting, you're going to be popping that every time. So he has a 3-up save in shooting. And this is the most important thing, he can fly. And so this Slon, who is already going to give him better spell immunity, can also let the Dread Saurian fly so that he can get around the board. To be honest, there's not a whole lot of other units that can buff our Dread Saurian because you see his keywords down there at the bottom: Order, Seraphim, Monster, Totem, and Dread Saurian. He doesn't have a Skink. He doesn't have Saurus keywords. He's kind of like the Croxagore. He's in that middle road of Seraphim where he's not really on one faction or the other. So he can't really take too many buffs. We do have a few things that can buff just basic Seraphim, but most of them have those keywords for Skink or Saurus. So he doesn't have either one of those. But he does have the Totem keyword, which is new for Age of Sigmar 3. And that means he can use command abilities. And so Dread Saurian isn't quite a hero, but it almost kind of acts like one. So as a totem, you have an 18-inch range on those command abilities. It's basically the same range as your general on command abilities. And so you're able to spend command abilities not only on other units around you, but also on the Dread Saurian itself. And so it can use command abilities on itself, which is huge. That makes a lot of these buffs that come in Age of Sigmar 3, he's able to apply them to himself. So that's really nice. That's where we'll see a lot of use for that one. So one of the most immediate uses is just +1 to hit. So there is a +1 to hit command ability, and the Dread Saurian, if you're really wanting to kill something, you probably might want to use that on his attacks. So you take those terrible 4-up to hits and bring them down to at least a 3-up to hit. And that gets you a little bit more damage. Not a whole lot more, to be honest. You went from 11 to 14. So it helps, but it's not a huge difference. As I said, he's not a damage dealer. 14 is still nice. Don't get me wrong. 14 is nice. It will still kill a lot of stuff. But when you see how big this thing is on the board, you expect it to do more than 14. Some of the common buffs, like a Star Priest, don't really do much to him. He doesn't really have a quantity of attacks, and so it doesn't really add much to it, I don't think. But let's look at some of the stuff that Age of Sigmar 3.0 brings to him. So Dread Saurian is a monster and a totem, so you can use command points. But that monster has special abilities, these monstrous rampages. So we're looking at Roar. That's the first one. So in the charge phase, you can use these on monsters. So in the charge phases, you're going to need to be looking to use these on the Dread Saurian every time you can. He's going to be one of your centerpiece monsters. Pick which one is the best in those abilities, and at the end of the charge phase, pop these monstrous rampages. The first one is Roar. Pick one enemy unit within 3 of this model and roll dice on a 3-up. They cannot use, issue, or receive commands in the following combat phase. Now, this one is actually really good. You're thinking, great, I'm going to shut down their command points in the following combat phase. But what that does is that helps them not be able to go +1 to their save, not be able to do some of those things that they might do to negate your damage or to hit you back real hard. So this is a very good one that allows you to shut down their issues in the combat phase. Stomp, this one adds extra D3 mortals. Basically gives you some more mortals that you would get on the charge. This, can add to those mortals that you've already done, and you're probably going to be doing some damage from those charges, and this helps you add to that. Especially mortal wounds in Age of Sigmar 3 are a big deal. Titanic Duel, pick an enemy monster within 3, add 1 to those hit rolls if you target that monster. So this one just helps you kill other monsters. Smash to Rubble, you can destroy terrain features with this Dread Saurian. So some very useful things there. I'm, of course, looking at Roar and Stomp as probably the two you'll use the most unless you're attacking a monster and you use Titanic Duel. There's some good spells that will help him out a lot. Mystic Shield, this is your base spell that everybody knows. And now it just adds 1 to the save rolls. This is fantastic for the Dread Saurian because he was on a 4-up, 35 wounds, and now you're adding 1 to his save. So now he's a 3-up. And you can always, if you're facing somebody that's doing Rend, you can add 1 to your save rolls with the command ability, and now you're negating that Rend, and you're still back to a 3-up. You can't ever go below 3-up save, but you can use Mystic Shield plus that Starseer plus the command ability to help negate Rend that's coming into him if you need to. Levitate is just another way to get your Dread Saurian to fly. That's one of the generic spells. I think you have to take an enhancement to get that one. And we don't really need that because we do have some Slann spell lore, which I think you're always going to be taking a Slann with Dread Saurian. And one of them is Celestial Apotheosis. So casting value of 5, you pick a friendly unit wholly within 18 of the caster, and heal 1 wound. In addition, until your next hero phase, subtract 1 from the bravery characteristics of the enemy units while they're within 3 of that unit. If the casting roll is a 10-up, heal D3 wounds. So I want to get to the heal in a second, but we're adding another -1 to the bravery. And so when we're stacking that on top of his already terror, and this is a different word, so we can stack this one on. Now they're going to be -2 bravery. So they're going to half their bravery and then subtract 2 from it. And so now, there's lots of ways to get around bravery with the inspiring presence command ability and all that kind of stuff. But this is a way that if you're doing a lot of damage, if you're doing those 10, 11 damage to your opponent, and you can trigger this stuff to make more run in Battle Shock, it can be good. You could end up killing more than you did in combat that way. The heals are also fantastic. We're gonna talk about this here in a second, but notice all the different ways that we're able to heal the Dread Saurian. Here is one of them. It's either 1 or up to D3 if you can roll high. And a lot of times with the Slann, you're going to be rolling high because you're getting +1 to its cast naturally, +1 maybe from the Sacred Asterisms, plus another one from maybe the Astrolith Banner Bearer. And so you can easily get up to that 10-up cast to do D3 heals. So that's very good. Also, Walk Between Realms. Another way to make a friendly unit fly. So we have multiple ways to make this Dread Saurian fly. There's a spell, there's a command ability, and there's an enhancement spell if you just absolutely need a third way to get him to fly. So it shouldn't be a problem making this Dread Saurian fly so that he can get around the board. We do have some prayers that are beneficial. Now, we don't have a prayer lore, but we do have some super cheap skink priests. And they're 80 points now, and they can take one of these prayers. And these are the generic ones. The Bless and then the Heal is one that they can add to their Warscroll. But Bless is a prayer that has an answer value of 4, and you pick one friendly unit within 12, and they get a 6-up ward save. So that's pretty awesome. Given those 35 to 37 wounds, a 6-up ward save just helps keep them alive. And Heal is a prayer that has an answer value of 3 and a range of 12. If answer, pick one friendly model within range, invisible to Chanter, you can heal D3 wounds. So again, we're getting another heal. We're trying to keep this Dread Saurian alive. In that same vein, we're looking at the Emerald Life Swarm. This is a predatory endless spell. It does move It has a range of 6, casting value of 6. That screenshot there is very blurry. Sorry about that. When it's set up, you heal D3, and then when you move it, it heals D3. So when you cast this, make sure you can set it up within range of the Dread Saurian if he's been taking damage, and he'll heal. And then at the end of the hero phase, when you move all the endless spells, he'll heal again. And what's nice is, because we're in Seraphim, we're always going to control this endless spell, whoever casts it, as long as they're still alive, which would probably be your Slon. So it's just going to follow that Dread Saurian, and it's going to heal in the opponent's hero phase too. At the end of their hero phase, when everybody's moving their endless spells, you're going to move this to the Dread Saurian, heal them another D3. So you got another ways to heal. So I think you see the pattern we're establishing here. This I think is the secret sauce for the Dread Saurian. We've got heals for days. We've got D3 heals from the prayer. We've got up to D3 heals from the Slon's Celestial Apotheosis spell. We've got D3 heals from the Life Swarm setup. We've got D3 heals when it moves. We've got D3 moves when it moves in their hero phase as well. And I didn't have a slide for this. I should have had a slide for this. We have D3 heals at the start of shooting from the Engine of Gods. The Engine of Gods can roll dice on a Cosmic Engine roll. 2 dice. Statistically, you'll probably roll heals most of the time unless you have a Slon nearby. And you'll heal. You can double tap that in Thunderlizard for an extra command point. So you can get, at the end of shooting, you can get another D3 heals from the Engine of Gods. And so in your turn, you can heal the Dread Saurian 6 D3 wounds. That is awesome, because he has 35 to 37 wounds, and now you're telling me you're going to heal 6 D3 wounds up on the Dread Saurian. This is awesome. And you get D3 in the opponent's turn. So this thing is the definition of a tank. And I think that's our conclusion, is that the Dread Saurian is just a pure tank. We're talking 35 wounds, 37 in Coalesce, which is where I think I'm going to put a Dread Saurian. He reduces damage by 1. You've got easy access to a 3-up save from multiple sources, either from the Slon and shooting if you need it, from the Starseer if you need it that way, or he can just spend a command ability on himself because he's a totem and get to a 3-up save with a command ability. So easy access to a 3-up save. You have access to 6 D3 heals, access to a 6-up ward save. So all that combined together, this guy is going to take a ton of damage. And in this season of Age of Sigmar, we're fighting in Gur, and so he can spend a command point to always fight at the top bracket. And so that is very nice as well, as that you can keep him fighting top bracket, you can keep him moving top bracket. So that right there is pretty nice. He have big letters down here, distraction Carnifex, and he still has enough output to do damage to kill things, but you want to get this Dread Saurian shoved into the enemy lines as quick as possible. And he's not terribly slow. He's faster than Gotrek. If we look at his Warscroll, he's got a 10-inch move. Now, a lot of these deployment zones are 18 inches apart in Age of Sigmar 3. And so that means you got an 8-inch charge. That's a little difficult to make, but with the Sacred Asterisms, if you know you're going to try to slam him in turn 1, flip those over to +1 to charge, and now he's only got to make a 7-inch charge, and since he's totem, he can re-roll that charge with a command point. So you got a 7-inch charge re-rolling. You should be able to make that statistically across the board. Turn 1, shove this into your opponent's lines, and then make them deal with 37 wounds, reducing damage by 1 on a 3-up save, and healing 6 D3. That is awesome. So a lot of ability here, I think, to just tank damage for your army. You're going to slam that into your enemy. You're going to take the objectives with the other things while they're trying to deal with this gigantic 280 millimeter monster in their face. What about list building? I got to wrap this up, man. Going too long talking about the Dread Saurian. We've got the battalions here, and I think I wanted to highlight a couple things on this real quick, but it fits very nicely into a battle regiment. You see those shaded areas down there at the bottom, and that is the Dread Saurian will fit into that monster role really easily. there on that battle regiment. And so I think you're going to see him a lot in that battle regiment. You're already getting your big monster hero if you wanted to in there, a couple small heroes, and then all your battle line if you want to. You can also put them into line breakers, which I think is fine if you're taking other monsters, and even Alpha Beast Pack. In this, you can have some interesting stuff because you get to move D6 in this turn. So if you include him and another monster, or if you're crazy enough, 2 Dread Saurians, then put them in that Alpha Beast Pack, because then you can move it D6. You're getting them even closer. If you're rolling average on that, like 3 or 4, now he's moving in his first turn 14 effectively. Now your charge is only 4 inches, or 3 with the Sacred Asterisms. So now you're 100% getting them across the table. So that is a great way to put them in there. I do have a sample list I put together, and I'm focusing on the heals. So this list here, I'm looking all for those heals. And so what I've got is I am taking Thunderlizards. So he does have 37 wounds. We're in Coalesced, so he's -1 to his damage, +1 to jaw attacks. Grand strategy is Beastmaster. I always take that one in Seraphim Thunderlizards, because I just got to keep one monster alive throughout the game, and usually I have enough monsters to do that. I'm taking my Engine of the Gods as my general. That's kind of an odd general pick. Usually I try to put him into the artillery slot in the battle regiment, but because I'm going to fill up that slot with my behemoth, I need him as my general. And so I am taking Engine of the Gods as my general and giving him the command trait Prime War Beast, so he's extra killy, and the artifact Amulet of Destiny. That's the enhancement I'm taking for this, because I am going to take a Warlord Battalion. You'll see that in a second. But that gives him a 5-up ward save, which is awesome on the Engine of Gods, especially because he's going to be healing himself and healing the Dread Saurian. So now we've got 2 monsters that are really hard to kill. I'm taking a Slan with dumping the artifact Fusel of Conflagration on him, and Celestial Apotheosis to heal. Skink Star Priest, I'm taking Hand of Glory, not necessarily to buff the Dread Saurian, but to buff my Source Knights, which you'll see here in a bit. They're only units of 5, but they can still do damage, especially when they can get the mortal wounds off. I do have 2 Skink Priests with Universal Prayers of Heal, and so I'm taking both of them with Heal. You can't use both of them at the same time, but I'm probably just gonna glue those to the just put them right up next to the Dread Saurian, and one of them is probably gonna get killed. These guys get killed very easily, especially by Smite. 2 turns of Smite, and one of these is dead. And so I'm doubling up on those Skink Priests. And I'm taking 2 units of 5 Source Knight Battle Lines. These are great screens. I love these Knights in Age of Sigmar 3. They're my favorite screen. They can spread out wide if they need to. They can do an okay amount of damage for a battle line for 110 points, especially when you put the Star Priest mortal wounds on them. They're doing fine. I'm taking 5 Source Guard for the Slan to help keep him alive, because he is going to be up there with the Dread Saurian. We're just going all in. We're going hard. We're going balls to the wall here, guys, with this Dread Saurian. And so I'm also taking a Stegodon, because you have to have a Stegodon in Thunderlizards as one of your battle line options. And so and then my Behemoth is Dread Saurian. And we're getting Emerald Lifestorm in there. We got 2 battalions, a Warlord, and a Battle Regiment. So this is a 5-drop list, so pretty good. You're gonna get pretty low on those drops. You're gonna probably be able to get into 5 drops. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell yet how many drops the normal armies are going to have, but I suspect we're going to have a lot of 5-drop armies, because a lot of people are going to be taking Warlord to get that extra enhancement, and then Battle Regiment to fill in everything else. So you're about average on drops, I think. And then the additional enhancement was the artifact. So there's my sample list for my Dread Saurian if I'm taking. Let me know if you have a list for Dread Saurian. What do you think? Is 37 wounds, healing, 6 D3 a turn. Is that a bad player experience? I don't know. I don't think Dread Saurian's competitive. I don't ever think I've seen a tournament win with him, but this sure sounds like a heck of a lot of fun. Maybe I need to go back and buy one. All right, guys. Let me know. Do you have Dread Saurian? All the Dread Saurian owners, sound off. If you made it this far, let me hear you. All right, guys. We'll see y'all later.